Okay, today we have Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. He's an epidemiologist, the former Democratic gubernatorial candidate in Michigan, and the host of a great podcast, America Dissected. Dr. El-Sayed, thank you so much for coming on.
Brian, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So let's jump in. Obviously, the news this week is that Trump tested positive for coronavirus. So let's talk about his positive test. Based on his treatment, does he have a severe case?
Well, based on the treatment he got unprecedented treatment. I just want folks to understand this. He got a combination remdesivir, dexamethasone. Remdesivir is an antiviral medication. It was initially created to battle Ebola. Wasn't particularly effective for that, but it was found to be effective against the coronavirus. And then dexamethasone is a corticosteroid. So you keep hearing the word steroid. It's not one of those like anabolic meathead steroids. It's a steroid that affects a different part of the anatomy. And it is designed to knock back the immune system because one of the things that makes you extra sick is that the immune system has an overreaction to the coronavirus, and the symptoms can be really ugly. That's not unprecedented. What is unprecedented is that he got what's called compassionate use of this monoclonal antibody cocktail alongside the dexamethasone and the remdesivir. Now that's unprecedented because number one, that monoclonal antibody cocktail hasn't cleared phase 3, meaning we don't have strong evidence about the safety and efficacy of that particular cocktail. Although it seems that if you're going to give it to the president, there's pretty good indication that it's likely to clear. But we got to wait for the science, as we well know. And then second, we have not seen it used ever in combination, at least as far as we know, with these other drugs. And so you don't give this, throw the kitchen sink type of treatment to somebody who's not very sick. And so, from what we understand based on the treatment and based on, what we can glean from his medical team's non-transparent assessment and what they've shared with us is that he was pretty sick. And at several moments, his oxygen saturation, a measure of how much oxygen your lungs are letting into the body, dipped into pretty scary levels. And then finally, just the indication is that you don't send a president in the middle of a re-election campaign to the hospital unless you think they have the real potential of getting quite sick. So yes, he had what is a serious case. It's unclear where he is now just because they're not sharing any real information. But this was a serious case.
And so based on your experience and based on what you know about his case, I mean, would he still be contagious?
Well, the fact is that the CDC's recommendation is that anybody who has COVID-19 should be isolated away from anyone for 14 days. That is the recommendation. And, the notion that they can rule him healthy at this point flies in the face of all the science we have. Even if he was to test negative, meaning he wasn't shedding virus in his nasopharynx, the part of the body that's swabbed, it still doesn't indicate that he's out of the woods, and it doesn't indicate that at a future point, that he wouldn't be potentially shedding. And so, even beyond that, right, this is the president of the United States. If anybody is going to follow CDC protocol in a moment where we're trying to tell everybody that they ought to follow the protocol to keep the rest of the folks around them healthy, it should be the president of the United States. And yet, as we've seen, and as we've seen from the very beginning, this president cares very little about the well-being of people around him, cares a lot more about what he thinks to be in his political self-interest. And the notion that he wants to go out and rally after, just a week after having contracted a serious case of COVID-19 is an absurdity to me, because you shouldn't be rallying in the middle of a COVID pandemic anyway, even if you're not sick yourself.
Right. Even if you yourself aren't the super spreader. And I'm going to get back to the rally in a moment. I just want to stay on this for a quick sec. So, we hear about coronavirus patients kind of dipping in and out, getting worse. They might have it bad the first few days, and then it might get better. And then they might take a turn for the worse. We hear about that a lot. Like, after the first 10 days, they can take a dip. What does that say about Trump's case in particular? I mean, is it likely that he can face the same situation as we've heard?
It's certainly possible. I mean, look, we don't know what the consequences of his treatment are. It may be that the treatment that they gave him was particularly effective, and he really is out of the woods. The fact is, it's hard to say without transparency, without a very clear, direct indication of what his course looks like. But we do know that there's a classic second week slump in these patients. You know, they look good for 5 to 8 days, and then all of a sudden the second week takes a turn for the worst. And, you know, this is a 74-year-old man with clinical obesity and a history of other mild ailments. And, you know, these are the folks that you're most worried about. And so, you know, it really is hard to say, but he certainly, you know, at this point, it's clear that it's still possible if you just look at the clinical case data and ask, you know, what tends to happen to folks who are 74, who are obese, who've had a serious COVID-19 case. Well, you know, this is there's a probability that is not negligible of him having a turn for the worst.
So you had mentioned transparency. I want to talk about Trump's doctor for a moment. Now, his doctor is technically like a naval officer, right? And so in theory, like his chain of command is up to as high as the president of the United States. So is he bound by the same rules as other regular doctors, or is he allowed to kind of say whatever he wants because ultimately it's up to the commander-in-chief's discretion how and if he will continue to serve?
What is frustrating here is you've got an individual who's caught between his allegiance to his profession as a physician and his position in the chain of command as a military officer who answers to his patient. And here is a real challenge. You know, in this situation, given that you're talking about the health of the president of the United States, which is a clear national security question, you would expect that we would get full transparency and that there would be a decision from the patient, who is the president of the United States, to be fully transparent with the public, because, of course, that's what the position would require. That being said, we have seen the president, who is the single person who can address and clarify this conflict of interest that his doctor faces, systematically put his perceived political self-interest ahead of the well-being and the interest of the American public to whom he is responsible. And so, you know, you're seeing the situation where this doctor is caught between a rock and a hard place and clearly fears more what Donald Trump will think of him than whether or not he's meeting his ethical duties to his profession.
Yeah. And by the way, this isn't, you know, a new thing for Trump. I mean, this putting his political fortunes above the health and safety of not only himself but the American people goes all the way back to day one. You know, when he knew what the effects of this virus were, he knew the transmissibility of this virus, he knew the lethality of this virus, he knew that it could affect older folks as well as younger folks. You know, and we found that out through the Bob Woodward tapes. But he was saying, you know, publicly, he was saying something completely opposite, and that was as far back as February.
That's right. And I want to be clear about something. You know, Trump ethically and his doctor ethically are under no compunction to share anything. I mean, at the end of the day, he has, you know, patient privileges just like everyone else. The thing about it is that he's the president of the United States. And the thing he doesn't seem to understand is that when you're the president of the United States, yes, you have an added burden of responsibility to the people that you have sworn to serve. And your health is of very clear consequence to their well-being in the middle of a pandemic. And in the middle of a world that you've made a lot less safe. And so, you know, at the end of the day, yes, you know, nobody's required to share anything per basic physician and patient ethics. But like when you're the president of the United States, you have added responsibilities, and that's his health. Now, when it comes to what he knew about this pandemic early on, it is very clear that he knew one thing and has said another. And he has sought almost every step of the way to listen to his medical advisors simply so that he could say the opposite thing and create a setting wherein it looked like there were two sides to every story so that he could buy himself out of doing what was right from a public health perspective to save lives. I mean, that is the classic Trumpian approach to almost every problem. Create another narrative, say that other people are saying, right? So that it's not just you.
Yeah, many, in fact.
Many people are saying, right? And then, you know, create an echo chamber and then make it look like there are two different approaches, two different sides to the story. And when it comes to science, there aren't really two different sides of the story about what you do in the middle of a pandemic. And so he has gone to war against the scientific establishment. He's gone to war against his own public health advisors, his own public health agencies. And meanwhile, 210,000 people are casualties of that war. And still, at this point, he still continues to degrade and to deny and to push back against his scientists and in the scientific consensus about this disease, even after he himself had what was a case that quote unquote spooked him, as it should have, because he got quite sick.
Right. And it's not just him, by the way. I mean, everybody surrounding him, his own wife. I mean, Kayleigh McEnany, Kellyanne Conway, Chris Christie's in the hospital. We haven't heard from Chris Christie in over a week. Nobody knows how he's doing. Beyond that, Herman Cain got sick from coronavirus after Trump's Tulsa rally and died. I mean, I don't know how much more of a scare you need than one of your supposed friends and advisors literally dying after he attended your rally, where in the middle of a state that was seeing an outbreak, a spike in coronavirus. But you can't get much worse than having him literally die.
Brian, we say that because we care about the people around us, and what ought to be clear is that this man doesn't care about the people around him. And honestly, if you're a Trump advisor, or you're a member of the Trump White House, if you're one of Trump's family members, right? Like, you got to ask, why am I still doing this? Because he's going to throw me under the bus as soon as it makes political sense in his, convoluted mind to do so. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like when you lack basic moral decency to care about the human well-being of the people around you, you will do or say anything so long as it seems to be a good idea for your own well-being in the short term. And I don't have to say that this is an obviously dangerous thing as a precedent, but still, like, to all the folks who aid and abet him, like, I just got to ask why. Like, at some point, like, when you see him systematically just running roughshod over the people who are supposed to matter the most to him, what makes you think that he cares about you? And what makes you think that this is a good idea to continue to do his dirty work for him when every single indication shows that he's going to throw you under the bus, or you're going to wind up under the bus because you did the wrong thing anyway? I just can't understand why people continue to engage with this man. Is the love of power or the love of access to power so great to you that you are willing to aid and abet someone who's actively putting people in harm's way, who could care less about you? I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly put. So sticking with Trump's treatment for a moment, if Americans more broadly had the same level of treatment that Trump did, what would the survival rate be in this country? I mean, we've lost 210,000 Americans, but obviously most Americans don't have access to the same level of treatment that the president of the United States does.
That's right. I mean, look, the crazy thing about this is that this is a man who clearly benefited from government health care, despite having paid $750 in taxes for 2 years and zero taxes for 10 out of the 15 years before he became president, and is actively trying to strip away healthcare from 30 million Americans, and seems to think that ideas like Medicare for all are an anathema to the American way, despite the fact that he just took advantage of it. Yeah. It's impossible to say how many more people would have lived, but here's the thing, right? Imagine we had invested in public health in this country in a way where we recognized that the consequences of hundreds of thousands, millions of sick Americans would cost the system as much as it has in lives and livelihoods. And we were to invest in public health the way that we invested in militarizing our country and every other country after 9/11. Imagine what it would mean for being able to prevent the kind of pandemic that we're seeing right now and save people who got sick in the first place. We haven't done that in this country because we haven't valued those things. And and then you've got a president who is just caught in frank hypocrisy around his position relative to government healthcare. We need more government healthcare, not less. We need more public health, not less. And this is a man who just benefited from government healthcare, trying to tell us we need less.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fundamental failure by those in the Republican Party to be able to predict, these catastrophic events that are going to befall us, like events that have to deal with public health, with climate change, and instead take these retroactive approaches to try and save money. But ultimately, I mean, when these public health catastrophes like coronavirus befall us, they end up costing leagues more than if we had just taken measures in the first place.
That's right. And this is the thing, right? Is that, when you're a Republican lawmaker and you run on this idea of cutting government spending, and you don't know anything about how government works, and you're just out there with your scissors cutting and cutting and cutting, what you're doing is you're leaving us less safe because of it. And unfortunately, with public health is we're in the situation of trying to demonstrate, right, why we're valuable when bad things don't happen because we exist. And so, we'll be out there advocating for our budget to keep people healthy. And these same lawmakers are like, well, we don't see what you're doing. And the point is, well, you don't see it because we're doing it. And if you cut our budget and our ability to do it, then at some point we won't be able to do it anymore. And at that point, you'll be stuck dealing with the consequences of our inaction because you literally cut us off at the knees. And this is where we are. If you look at the CDC budget over the last 20 years, if you look at local public health funding over the past 40 years, you see these budgets have been devastated. And so we were caught flat-footed dealing with this pandemic. And the crazy thing about it is, there's no greater indictment of this governing hypothesis that the market can do it better than the fact that the richest, most powerful country in the world suffered this pandemic worse than any other country in the world. That to me should be an open and shut case when it comes to this notion that small government really is effective. You heard Mike Pence talk about, trusting the American people. I mean, that's bullshit, right? Like, yes, you can trust the American people and protect the American people at the same time, right? I mean, that'd be like saying, well, you know what, we're not gonna invest in the military because we trust the American people to deal with armed conflict with other countries on their own. Bullshit, just bullshit. And we've got to call it out every time we see it.
So while Trump was admitted to Walter Reed, he took a moment to drive in a car with some Secret Service agents because, God forbid, he didn't wave to the Proud Boys and QAnon supporters who were waiting outside. So what kind of risk were these Secret Service agents at? Did they have to quarantine for 14 days afterward? Did they have to avoid family contact?
I mean, absolutely. Like, they were in a hermetically sealed car with an actively hospitalized COVID-19 patient so that the COVID-19 patient could wave to his friends.
Yeah.
And they need to be fully quarantined and regularly tested, because if that's not exposure, I don't know what is. And sure, they were wearing goggles and they were wearing masks. But this is the kind of circumstance that you tell literally everyone to avoid. Also that the president could wave to the cameras because he got bored in the hospital.
Right. Do you agree with Joe Biden's decision not to debate Trump unless it's in a virtual format?
I mean, yeah, for the same reason that I think it's ridiculous that he forced a bunch of Secret Service agents into a car. This is supposed to be a town hall style debate. And I don't think anyone's showing up to a town hall with a COVID patient. Sorry, I wouldn't. And so for all these folks who are telling me that that Joe Biden really ought to show up, it's his duty to show up, I'd be like, okay, cool. So why don't you go and spend 90 minutes on a stage with a guy who actively has COVID, and then tell me what you think about that. We have this medium that all the rest of us have been forced to work on. Whether you like it or not. And it is what has facilitated most of our work, many of our work. Those of us who are privileged enough to do work that sits behind a computer, we've had to use this forum. I actually think it would be a very humanizing moment for the president to have to talk over his lack of mute button, because that's how the rest of us have had to deal with things. And yet he thinks he's too good for this. And the other problem is that obviously he's worried that the host will have a mute button, because that means he can't just talk over his opponent every single time his opponent is making a good point about his failure as a president.
The person that would stand to benefit the most from a mute button would probably be Donald Trump. I mean, him sitting there as a frantic lunatic at the first debate, the polls that came out after that debate showed that he fared really poorly. So I mean, if there's anybody that stands to benefit from being voluntarily or involuntarily quieted down a bit, it's Donald Trump.
The irony of this is that the only person I think who could show up to a debate and get points for not saying anything is Donald Trump. If he just stood there and shook his head, honestly, people were like, well, look at him. He's pretty well put together. Thoughtful Donald Trump today. Really brought a new look at who Donald Trump could be. Honestly, if I were him, I'd just sit there, turn the mute button on and just let the whole thing happen.
I mean, there are some points where all Trump has to do is, when he shows up at a press conference, is not set himself on fire and you have the media coming out to congratulate him because he has a new tone. The bar for Trump to succeed is so low, and yet somehow he manages to trip over it every single time.
And that's the thing is that, I think for a long time we've allowed the aura of his 2016 win to kid us into thinking that there's some form of genius in this.
Yeah.
But demagoguery works in politics. And unfortunately, Donald Trump is a demagogue, and we've been under this demagoguery for the past 3 years. I think what he showed himself to be in the last debate is an impetuous man with very few ideas and a penchant to bully instead of reason. And that's what's left us with 210,000 of our country, women and men, dead to a pandemic that really should have been prevented. And look, I get it. Viruses naturally occur. Pandemics don't. Pandemics are man-made. This is a function of failed public policy. There's a reason why almost every other high-income country in the world has figured out how to do this, and we still haven't. And it is because we have this kind of failure of leadership. And the last thing I'll say is that he is on a medication right now that we know has a number of psychological and psychiatric side effects. And the crazy thing about it is, and I'm not gonna speculate about what the side effects might be in Donald Trump. Crazy thing is, you don't actually know if it's side effects or just him being himself. And like that should tell us something, right? The fact that we're like, is this just Trump or is it the medicine talking? Like the fact that that's something you actually have to think through tells you a lot about who this person is and how he works. There is no genius in saying whatever comes to your mind. There's no genius in just shamelessly picking on people. There's no genius in denying the truth. That is just demagoguery, and it kills people, and we're seeing that.
Yeah, I was reading up about the medicine, and some of the side effects were mania, and there comes a point when you're like, oh, I don't know. Like I couldn't tell the difference. I couldn't tell the difference between him, sweating profusely and screaming like a lunatic yesterday versus a month ago, and like you said, I mean, that should give everybody pause more than anything else. I want to go over to his rally real quick. So as of this recording, Trump is set to host an event on Saturday and a rally in Florida on Monday. So even if he's on stage, if he's facing the crowd and talking at them for 90 minutes, are his supporters still at risk of contracting this virus from him?
I mean, it's certainly plausible, right? I mean, that's the thing is, if you're in an indoor setting and someone is sort of projecting at the top of their lungs, you can get it from them. We have pretty good evidence from a church setting where a choir member made all kinds of people around them sick because they were singing, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can imagine a speaker at the front of the stage potentially shedding virus and making a lot of people sick. But to me, like, just bigger dynamics, like how many people have to be exposed to a COVID-19 positive Donald Trump to make an out-of-state rally happen? Like, think about all of those people, and then think about all of the people that they could come in contact with, right? Because of course, the whole point of the event is to concentrate as many people in one place as possible. Yeah. So I just don't understand how this is at all something that anyone is allowing to happen. I mean, like, dear good people in Florida, like, whatever our political differences, please don't go to that rally. Like, I get you might vote for Donald Trump. I deeply disagree with you. But please do not put yourself in a situation where you are actively in the same space as a known COVID-19 positive person. Like, it's just not a good idea. It's just really a bad idea. So it's very sad to me. It's very frustrating to me when someone willingly and knowingly puts people in harm's way to advance his own ego, because that's what's happening right now. And people have gotten sick because of him, and many more could get sick because of him. And anyone with any basic ethics or morality would do everything they could to make sure they didn't make other people sick. And that's clearly not what this president's doing.
And you had mentioned this idea that it's not just Trump supporters who are impacted. And we see this with the right conflating individual freedoms with public health. And this is something that Mike Pence brought up too at the vice presidential debate. This issue of wearing masks, for example. Republicans frame it as a personal decision, but in reality, it affects everyone. Like, you may personally choose not to wear a mask, but if you contract the virus and then you go on to spread it to other people, then it's no longer just an individual decision. So no, these aren't personal steps. These are public health measures.
That's right, Brian. I would tell you this. Look, if you want to ride a motorcycle without a helmet on, I would deeply advise you not to do that. But if you want to do that, the person who's at risk is you. But what if I told you, right? This is the equivalent of saying, yep, I'm going to ride a motorcycle without a helmet on, and then my elderly mother could get sick because of it, right? Because that's what this is. And so, it's one thing to take your own health and your own well-being into your own hands. Everybody has the right to do that. It's another entirely to put your community's health in your hands, to put your kids' health in your hands, to put your elderly parents' health in your hands, to put a bunch of people you never met before's health in your hands, and then to think that somehow it's just about you. Like, that is a level of toxic individualism that I think we really need to be interrogating a little bit worse. Like, you're okay, right, to make sure that your health is in your hands, but like, your right to swing your arms ends where my face starts. And
Yeah.
right now we are making decisions that are affecting a lot of other people.
Yeah, really well put. So let's jump over to the situation in Michigan with Governor Whitmer right now. So this is your home state of Michigan. So we just found out about a thwarted plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer. These were instigated by Trump with his tweets to liberate Michigan, for example. And now, even after this threat against her life, Trump is back to attacking her. So can you speak on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is just deeply devastating. First, I know Governor Whitmer well. I actually ran against her in the primary in 2018. I'm really grateful that she and her family are safe and healthy. The idea that people would threaten her safety because she was willing to stand up to keep us all healthy is, to me, the example of what the kind of toxicity that we see out of Donald Trump creates. And, we got to call these folks what they are. They are terrorists. I mean, I was a junior in high school on 9/11, and for the rest of my life, I have had to live under an America that sees me, because of the color of my skin, because of how I pray, because of what my name is, as a potential threat. And what that does is it leaves us ignoring the real threats out there. And right now, the threat that we're seeing is radical, far-right white supremacy, and the terrorists who would undo our society's basic norms and mores. These are terrorists. We have to call them that. We have to recognize that is what the face of terrorism looks like right now. And so, we've got to step up against it. And then the other point is, there was all this this verbiage that we heard about radicalization. Like, we got to ask, why are these people getting radicalized? Well, there must be some radical extremist cleric out there who may be tweeting up a storm about all of the things that they think need to be done, like liberating Michigan, right? I mean, we've got to recognize that when leaders speak, there are consequences, and we've got to connect the dots on that.
So before you go, I do want to mention to those watching and listening, Abdul wrote a fantastic book called Healing Politics. I have it right here. He did not ask me to pitch this, but I promise you this book is worth it. So Dr. El-Sayed, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Brian, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.